President Trump says the next target for his crackdown on crime and illegal immigration is the city of Chicago. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump praised the National Guard's efforts in D.C., saying that crime is way down due to the success. He explained that Chicago comes next, then New York City. Take a listen.
So, I really am honored that the National Guard has done such an incredible job working with the police. And we haven't had to bring in the regular military, which we're willing to do if we have to. And after we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe also. We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. But they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
And this right here is some of the video of the National Guard's involvement in Washington, D.C. The Pentagon confirming those troops will now be armed with guns as they patrol the streets of the nation's capital. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth calling it, quote, common sense. And we do have this post right here that I want to pop up as he said that on social media hours ago, along with an article that said Secretary of Defense Hegseth authorizes National Guard troops to carry arms in D.C. Now, nearly 2,000 National Guard members are currently stationed in D.C. as President Trump continues that crackdown on crime. Trump warning that, quote, bad things will happen if D.C. officials do not, quote, immediately stop giving false and highly inaccurate crime figures. There will be a, quote, complete and total federal takeover of the city. Want to pop this up on your screen right here as we do have more developments. The Pentagon confirming to Fox News that up to 1,700 National Guard troops will mobilize in 19 states in the coming weeks to help with the president's crime and immigration plans. Here is a look at those 19 states on your screen, and as you can see, they are scattered all over the map. All of this expected to run through mid-November, with Texas projected to have the most significant National Guard presence. As you can tell, there is so much to discuss here, so I do want to bring in an expert to help break it down. We do have Jeff Wenninger, a retired police lieutenant and the founder and CEO of Law Enforcement Consultants. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and help to break it all down.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And first off, I do want to ask you overall, how unusual is it to see this level of military and law enforcement presence in a city like D.C. and what we could see happening in Chicago and New York City as well?
Well, it's not unprecedented. We've seen it in the past, but it's generally because of a specific event or civil unrest or some type of a natural disaster. I saw it back in Los Angeles in 1992 when we had the Rodney King riots. We saw it with Katrina in 2005. And, we saw it most recently in Los Angeles here this spring when we had the civil unrest. So it's not unprecedented. I guess really the question is, seeing the deployment of military personnel for the purpose of policing everyday crime trends, that's unprecedented.
Do you think we are going to see, as we see the National Guard deployed to places like Chicago and New York City, do you think we're going to see kind of a similar situation to what we've seen there in D.C.? Will it look pretty much the same?
Well, I think to the extent where when you flood an area with resources to address the crime, automatically the deterrent factor is going to reduce the crime. The key is, what is the long-term strategy to maintain a lower crime trends? That's the significant challenge for everything. And it's not a quick fix. When you're talking about crime, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So from a strategic standpoint, and developing objectives and strategies moving forward are going to be the key in being able to maintain lower crime trends.
And on that same note, I did want to ask you, when you have such a visible show of law enforcement and military there on the streets, we saw the video just moments ago, how does that kind of impact crime overall? Does it have a real impact as you look down the line when you see all of these folks out there? Do criminals look and say, whoa, I'm going to step back because I see everyone there?
Well, initially, in the area where the resources are being deployed, you're going to see an automatic, immediate reduction in crime. But there's key factors that we're not really going to know for a while what has occurred. Have we just displaced that crime? Are the criminals going elsewhere to commit the crime? And it's going to take a number of months to get the crime statistics to be able to determine if that's actually the case. And the reality is that we can have a circumstance where criminals go underground, so to speak. But once the resources are gone, we're going to be right back where we were to begin with. So like I said, it's really about the long-term strategies and posturing law enforcement in a position where they can be successful in and of themselves without the actual buildup of the military personnel to assist them.
What challenges, if any, could potentially arise when you do have multiple law enforcement entities operating in the same space, like what we see happening in D.C.? You've got the Metro Police as well as the National Guard.
Well, primarily you have questions of chain of command. Who do I report to? Who am I taking my orders from? But from an operational standpoint, it can be very challenging. From a logistics standpoint, you have to determine who has the authority to do what. You have multiple entities that don't have the same authority. And then you have to determine the training and experience and expertise of each entity in determining what is the best way to utilize them in accomplishing the goal. And then ultimately, it's about being effective with your communication, being able to communicate up and down the chain of command where people understand what the strategies, the objectives, and the tactics that are going to be used to address these circumstances. Now, the key here is having specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals. And the measures of effectiveness over the time period after these deployments occur are really going to be the story that's going to be told. So for me personally, I'm holding judgment until some time passes to see how effective this actually is, because we don't want a short-term solution. We want a long-term solution.
And a bit of a difficult question. It's probably tough to answer, but you have people who are all for this. You have the people who are in charge and calling for the National Guard to be there in this crime crackdown, saying this is an example of restoring law and order. You have critics who say it's just too much. So as a former law enforcement officer there, retired, I want to get your take on how you go about separating the political narrative from what's actually happening there.
Well, really, you have to be sensitive to the fact that people within D.C. are going to have different experiences. You have a population of just over 700,000 people, but the vast majority of the crime occurs in about 10% of the population. Wards 7 and 8 overwhelmingly are the most violent areas of the city, which need to be most significantly addressed, where you have to be surgical and specific in how you're going to address the violent crime trends. Because if you don't do that, then you're not going to be effective. So the reality is that the people that live in that area where there's about 73,000 people, just over 10% of the population, is going to have a very different experience with this increased deployment of personnel, because it's going to be their community is going to be policed, versus people that live elsewhere. Their experience is going to be different, where they're going to see objectively things are cleaner. There appears to be less crime, because it's not always about law enforcement. Can't just focus on crime itself and reducing crime. People have to feel that they're safe as well. So you have a bifurcated responsibility. And it's important that everybody within the community there, all 700,000 people, not only are living in a more safer environment, but that they feel safer.
All right, Jeff Wenninger, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help discuss all this further with your expertise. Anything else you want to add? Anything we missed before I let you go here?
No, I just think that this is unprecedented times. We have a president that is not afraid to think outside the box and to implement strategies that are unique and things we haven't seen in the past. I just urge people to be patient and allow things to play out. And hopefully in the long run, we will see what it is we're trying to accomplish: a reduction in crime and safer cities for our people in these neighborhoods and people that work and live and play in these communities to be in. So that's what I'm hopeful and looking forward to.
All right, Jeff, thank you again for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.